Hello, Danielle.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Yes, I'll be your moderator for your session. They're just wrapping up with Katie, so people should
Okay,
be starting to flow in here pretty soon.
okay,
Yeah, and then I'll be moderating the chat for you, the polls, so that you can just present and
okay.
we'll keep an eye on everything.
Great. You can hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear
Okay,
you perfectly.
perfect.
Yeah, and then if you have any slides or anything you want to share, there is the little share button. It should work pretty easily.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that right now. That's why I logged in early just to
Right.
be sure.
Yeah, and then I do have to share a little QR code at the beginning and at the end of your session just for students who are here for our EDGE program. And then after that, you should be able to start sharing your presentation.
Okay.
Perfect.
And let me actually put it into presentation mode.
Okay, sounds good. Perfect.
Guess the question is how do I get back into the So I guess if I'm presenting, then I won't be able to be in the conference at the same time.
So your icon is still in the conference, and that's pretty much what I'm here for, since while you present, it'll only show up the presentation on your screen, so you won't be able to see like the chat and things. But that's what I'm here for. I'll just be reading off any questions for you and telling you the results of the polls.
Okay.
Yes.
And so you can see it in presentation mode then where you're only seeing the first slide.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can see the presentation and your images at the bottom as well.
Okay, perfect.
Yes. Yeah, so people should be coming in here pretty soon. Oh, yep, we already have some people in here.
Could you hop into your session and see?
I already have.
Oh, Danielle's there?
Yes.
Hi. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I'm gonna hop over to Julie's session.
Okay.
Direct traffic to funnel them in. They just finished up with the keynote.
Okay, great.
Thank you. I think people are rolling in.
Yep.
Or rolling back in.
Yep. So as soon as more people get in here, I'll present you. I'll have this up for a few seconds so that they can scan if they're here for the EDGE, and then I'll unshare it, and then we can start with your presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're just going to wait until exactly 1 and then we can start.
Okay.
So for the QR code, I saw that somebody's having issues with it. You should be able to scan it already.
Which session are you monitoring?
Okay, I think we should be good to start now. So hello, everybody. We have Danielle today presenting a presentation on being assertive in the workplace. If you're here for Edge, here's the QR code that you can scan. I will also have a prompt up at the end of this session. So if you didn't get a chance to scan it now, you can scan it later. And take it away, Danielle.
Great, thank you, Anna. Can you see my presentation?
You stopped sharing the presentation.
Just reshare it here. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this session today on for the Find Your Voice conference. I'm going to have a few slides here to take you through some ideas around assertiveness and just around practicing assertiveness. I am the CFO at AttackIQ. We're in the breach and attack simulation space, so I've been specializing in cybersecurity for about the last 15 years. I'm almost embarrassed to tell you when I graduated from Central. I will tell you it was in 1996, but I will allow you to do the math in your head. But I am a proud alum of the college, and I just want to thank you all for taking the time to attend the breakout session today. So from an agenda perspective, we're going to talk about just sort of an overview of what it means to be assertiveness. I'm going to talk about assertiveness in the workplace, and that's really broken out into 3 areas. The first one being why women fear being assertive, the benefits of being assertive, and then some tips for being assertive. And then the last thing that I will go through is just some real life examples of things that I have experienced in my career that hopefully will resonate with you all and help you as you move through your career. The one thing I do want to say is that I am not a fan of making generalizations normally, but during this presentation, I will be making some generalizations about some of the differences between men and women. I feel that for the purpose of this presentation, it's important to acknowledge some of those things. So just kind of keep that in mind that I will be making some generalizations here. Anna, do you want to go ahead and do the polls before we jump into the presentation?
Yeah, of course. So if you guys look over to your sessions tab, there's a chat, polls, people, and Q&A. Feel free to go ahead and vote for both of those polls, and I'll give it about a minute or 2, and after that, we can discuss the results.
Great. And then, Anna, do you want me just to keep going? I'm actually going to do the results in the last session around real life examples, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So there's a lot of words on this slide. I promise this is the only slide where I'm actually going to read from, but I do think it's very important to just set the tone of what we're actually talking about here. So I thought the best way to look at this is talk about some of the definitions of assertiveness. What does it mean to be assertive? And so the first bullet point here means that assertiveness is the ability to stand up for what you believe in while staying calm, while staying positive, and respecting the rights of others. When you're assertive and when you learn to be assertive, you ask for what you need, you talk openly about what you want, and you recognize when someone is taking advantage of you. And then finally, when you learn how to be assertive, you learn how to approach things with confidence, and you will make a direct impact on your environment, whether it's work or work professional or personally. And you're looking at me, I'm sure, and saying, oh, well, that all sounds really easy. But you know what? Assertiveness does not come easily for everyone. And it's okay to recognize that. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 25 years, and it has taken me quite a while to get where I am and to feel comfortable being assertive in everything that I do. So I'm going to move on here and talk about some of the reasons why women fear, being assertive. So from my perspective, the first reason is that we're afraid of being seen or being called aggressive or bossy. I think that comes from, us being, younger girls. And I don't know if you were called a social butterfly as a kid or bossy as a kid. I remember growing up being called that. And so I think we as we're raised sort of have that fear. And so what we do is we tend to soften our speech, or we state our opinions with qualifying statements like, I think we should do this, or I feel we should do this, when we should be saying, we should do this. Not I think, not I feel, we should. And then oftentimes, a lot of women don't like to be the center of attention in a professional work environment. And so we either slump or we, sit in the background. Hence one of the questions that, that I asked from a poll perspective. Instead of sitting up straight and being confident, those little things can make a big difference. And I think we do fear that. The second thing is we fear negotiating for what we want. I think it is a well-known fact that women in general get paid less than men, and I'm a firm believer it's because we feel guilty asking for more money. So a lot of times we take what we're offered instead of knowing what our worth is and fighting for that worth. And so the third point here is know your worth. And I go back to, I have daughters. I have a 19-year-old and I have a 16-year-old. And, I always tell them, you don't get what you don't ask for. So know your worth. The third thing is around just fearing conflict. And so I think, again, another generalization is women tend to be very good at building relationships, but sometimes we're reluctant to disagree because we don't want to alienate people. We want to be liked. And God forbid that we are perceived as bitchy. Excuse my language, but that is, I think, a fear that we all, that we all have, that if we are assertive or we do speak our mind, that somehow that's going to be viewed as, as being bitchy. And that's scary for a lot of us. And then finally, we also fear self-promotion. And so I think as women, we can often equate confidence with arrogance. But that does not have to be the case. And so I like to call attention to the fact that there's a difference between self-promotion and shameless self-promotion. And so you can promote your accomplishments without being obnoxious about it. And again, sort of going back to you don't get what you don't ask for, in the same vein here, that if people do not know about your successes and what you're capable of, you may not get the opportunities that you deserve. And so, these are some common themes from my perspective in terms of why women fear being assertive. If we move on and talk a little bit about the benefits of being assertive, I'm going to go through these in a bit of detail here. And sorry, give me just a second here. Sorry. So the first thing here is it will help you transform into a leader that other people respect. I believe that this is one of the most important benefits of being assertive. And the reason for that is that by being assertive, you earn the respect of the people that you work with. I've seen this in my own career. When you speak with confidence, when you really understand and know the topic that you're discussing, and you talk about it with confidence, that helps transform you into a leader. Those are qualities that leaders have. Being assertive will also help you earn people's respect because you treat others fairly. That's what being assertive is about. But you still maintain the law of the office or the letter of the law, however you want to look at it. And then one of the other things about being a true leader and being assertive is that not only should you take pride in what you've accomplished as an individual, but also take pride in what your team has done and accomplished together. Again, that will help you earn the respect of others. And very important here, and this has actually happened to me quite a bit in my career, where people have taken credit for my ideas or my work. Just don't do that. It's not worth it. Give credit when credit is due. Celebrate your individual wins, but celebrate your team wins as well. But never celebrate a win that isn't your own. That's just a little piece of advice from me there. The second thing is that a second benefit, of being assertive is that it will help you resolve conflict without being aggressive or hurtful to others. If we go back to the definition of assertiveness, remember that it's about respecting the rights of others. And so, being assertive is about expressing your feelings or opinions in an open manner, not violating the rights of others that we talked about. And the one thing that we need to get comfortable with, and one of the benefits of being assertive, is around, disagreements need to happen, because if they don't, then you can't weigh the best options for a decision. So, learning to be assertive, learning to be able to deal with conflict in a confident manner is very important. And when you're talking about assertiveness and not turning into aggressiveness, always make sure that we're initiating respectful discussions that you can feel good about it. Even though it may not resolve the problem, or you may not, your suggestion may not be taken, that you behaved well, And again, that's the most important thing to come out of that. The third thing that I like to focus on from a benefit perspective is just it can help you improve your self-confidence. Self-confidence is critical to learning to be assertive. It helps you feel comfortable advocating for yourself, rather than being influenced by the views and opinions of others. And as long as you remain respectful and empathetic, which I'll talk about empathy in a few slides here, but if you're being empathetic and of other people's times and needs, there's nothing wrong with advocating for your own rights and needs in the workplace. In fact, it's very important to get what you want, out of your job, out of your career. And then, finally, and the other reason why self-confidence is so important to becoming assertive is that when you realize that you deserve to be respected as anyone else is, it helps you gain that confidence to stand up for yourself. And that is actually something that can translate also into, your personal life. So the fourth benefit for being assertive is just it actually helps you communicate your needs confidently. So you'll see me use the word confidence and confident, quite a bit throughout this presentation. But advocating for yourself is not just about feeling better or having a better experience. It actually enables you to perform at your highest potential, which then in turn gives a tremendous contribution to you and to your company that you're going to choose to go work for. In order to communicate confidently, you need to focus also on listening to the needs and feelings of others while creating an open dialogue about your own needs. But this is what I like to refer to as kind of a win-win in the business place. So you're getting your point across, but you're also listening to someone else's point of view as well, and acknowledging them and acknowledging their opinion. And then once you've made your needs clear, it's always important to sort of follow up and make sure that those needs are being met appropriately. And if they're not being met, then in a couple slides here, I'll talk about some tips for you to kind of go back and have a conversation to make sure that your needs are being met after you do speak of them and do speak of what you need. The fifth benefit is around helping you recognize that you can only control your own behavior. I'm going to mention my daughters quite a bit through this presentation because I practice with them because they're not much younger than some of you folks are that I'm speaking to today. And so I wanted to make sure that this resonated with them. And they're like, Mom, you told us that throughout our entire life. This is another example here in terms of a benefit, in terms of recognizing you can only control your own behavior. And so assertive communication is about making sure your voice gets heard and respected, but it's not about controlling what others do. You can only control how you advocate for yourself. Control is somewhat of a slippery slope because it can easily slip into the territory of aggression. And so that's why learning that you can only control your own behavior and not the way others behave is a really important step to understanding the benefits of being assertive. The sixth one is around setting boundaries. And I know there's a whole other session on setting boundaries, but I do think it's important to mention it here as well in terms of being assertive. So learning and respecting your own personal boundaries is an important step towards controlling stress and frustration. I think we can all agree to that. And think about what you realistically expect of yourself and respect those limitations and make sure that others are respecting those limitations as well. And, I've learned this, as a mom of a working mom of two girls from the time that, I only took 6 months off with each child, that, being exhausted or resentful is not only miserable, but it really does keep you from performing at your best. And so setting boundaries is very, very important. And then the other thing that boundaries can do is it just adds clarity to professional relationships. No, I can't do that. Yes, I can do that. I can't do that this week, but I can do that next week. Those are all okay statements. And by learning to set boundaries, by being assertive, it helps you limit any type of unwelcome interactions or behavior. So then let's talk a little bit about, sorry, give me just a second here. Okay, so the last three here, it helps you build your judgment. So I just actually had a one-on-one meeting with an engineer over in Barcelona today. She's not on my team, she's in engineering, but we have every 2 weeks, we have a one-on-one. I'm a bit of a mentor to her. And we talked about this exact subject today, about being, how assertiveness helps build your judgment and how to learn to pick the right battles. And so the woman asked me, you know, we were talking about a certain situation at work where I didn't agree with something. I gave my opinion wasn't taken. And her question to me was, well, how do you decide what battle to pick and what not to pick? And we'll talk about that, you know, a little bit later. But it was funny how I actually do use these every day. I used it this morning. And so in terms of helping build your judgment, learning to pick the right battles, the more assertive you become, you will learn which battles to pick, which ones not to. And recognizing the fact that there will always be contentious situations at work is really important. And learning when to be assertive can help you judge when to speak your mind or when it's best to hold your tongue and listen more. And that will just, learning those two things, so when to speak your mind, when to hold your tongue, when it's the right time to pick your battles, will really help you avoid any type of, you know, potential trouble from a workplace perspective. Second to last here is it helps you become more self-aware. You know, we talk a lot about self-awareness. When I talk about it, I run HR at my company as well. So we talk about this quite a bit, actually. So self-awareness is key to personal and professional development. Being assertive doesn't mean that you're rude or condescending. It means being confident. It means, you know, commanding other people's attention and being authoritative. Those are all things that are okay. Being rude and condescending, not okay. And the last 2 points around being self-aware really come to ask yourself, what impact are you having on the people on your team, on your peers, on your direct reports, or others that you impact with a daily basis? Self-reflect on that. And I think what you'll start to notice is how people react to you, and whether you're creating a healthy environment or a toxic environment, based on the way that people act and what their behaviors are around you. And then finally, this is actually one of my favorites, and I tell this to my daughters all the time, is that it teaches you to say no. So this is, if you take anything away from this presentation, please take this away. No is a complete sentence. I'm going to pause there and I'm going to say it again. No is a complete sentence. So actually use the word no, not an alternative like I think I won't. Say no. If you can't do something, no. It's okay. It's okay to say no. And practice saying it. Practice it in your everyday life. It's hard. Again, I think that in general, women like to be people pleasers and they like to be liked. And so it's hard to say no, but in order to be assertive, and you will be much more successful if you learn when to say no. And again, no is a complete sentence. Okay, so we're going to move on here, and we're going to talk about the some tips for being assertive. So the first tip here is about expressing your opinion and speaking directly. So don't beat around the bush. Don't, I don't know. Use authoritative speech. And second, be direct while being respectful at the same time. It's a balance, and as you become more assertive and you keep going in your career, you will learn that balance. The second thing is take accountability for your own mistakes. Believe it or not, this is part of being assertive. It really is. We all make mistakes, first of all. Don't point fingers, own it, and move on. It's really that simple in terms of taking accountability. And I will tell you from my experience, when I make mistakes, I do take accountability, as hard as it may be, and sometimes, but I am telling you, your peers, your managers, your executives, they will respect you for owning up to your mistakes and then moving on. Don't dwell on it. Things happen, move on, learn from it, and don't do it again. Check your body language. So your body language, believe it or not, can communicate confidence. If I'm sitting here like this, or sit up straight, shoulders back, the best thing that you can do from your body language is to always choose confidence. Again, going back to the last thing where we talked about benefits of being assertive, get comfortable saying no. I'm repeating this again. It's okay to say no when you can't do something. Be direct and say why. This will also avoid people taking advantage of you, which is what we talked about in the beginning from a definition of assertiveness perspective. Because if you keep taking things on and don't say no when you're overwhelmed, people will learn that you're too nice to say no, and people will, human nature, take advantage of that. The fifth one here is around staying mindful. So what do I mean by that? I mean, don't speak out of anger and frustration. I'm a work in progress when it comes to that. And when you do stand up for yourself, you have to recognize you may not get what you want right away, but that's okay. Keep at it. Keep advocating for yourself. And that, remember that disagreements should be a conversation. So there will always be back and forth, and that's okay as well. So embrace that. Understand that that's going to happen. And if you can use these other tips and think about some of the benefits when you have those conflicts, I promise you will have a much better interaction. And then my personal favorite, and this is one I say, all the time. In my job, we went through and we met with every single person in the company and had a very open conversation about culture and what's working and what's not working. And I say this all the time, perception is reality. Well, what do I mean by that? So learn to take both positive and negative feedback, and you will get it throughout your entire career, and you should be asking for it. You should be asking for feedback. What do I do well? What do I need improvement on? And, I'll share a little bit of a personal story here, but, don't downplay positive feedback. We as women have a tendency to do that. I do it in my personal life all the time. My husband will say, I'll come out, we're going out. You look great. Oh no, I'm this, I'm that. I downplay that positive feedback. Stop doing that to yourself. It is not necessary. Embrace the positive feedback. It makes you who you are. And just as important is, do not dismiss negative feedback. When someone gives you negative feedback, you may not agree with it, but remember, perception is reality. And so if someone says, Danielle, you always speak over people, I may say, I never speak over people. That's the wrong reaction. The right reaction is like, oh, okay, can you give me some examples of that? You take the examples. I would take that feedback and I would go back and I would think about it and say, oh yes, I did speak over that person. Oh yes, I remember, I did that. Or you may say, you know what, I don't think I do that, but I'm going to be a little more mindful about it. And so it's really important not to dismiss negative feedback, but to reflect upon it. So now we're going to wrap up the presentation here with some real life examples. So I'm going to start out with the first one, and then Anna, I'm going to ask you to then give the results of the poll for the for the second one here. Okay, so real life examples here. So you do not need to behave like a man to excel in your career. And what do I mean by that? I mean, and I'll be completely and absolutely transparent here. When I'm 46 years old. The women that I had to model myself after, they behaved like men. They dressed like men. Everything was black and blue, and they had short hair. They didn't wear makeup. I refused to do that. I always dressed nicely. I've always had long blonde hair, and blue eyes, can't change that. I've always worn makeup. I've always dressed 2 levels above, where I was in my career. And I embrace my femininity. I think there's been a push to, not recognize that there are traditional differences between men and women. And I totally understand that, and I'm supportive of that. But we don't have to get rid of our femininity in order to be successful. And I just really encourage you all to think about that. Your femininity is not a curse. It actually can help you quite a bit. Again, some generalizations here, but women tend to be more empathetic than men. That makes us more approachable. People can identify with us more generally than they can with men. And so I really encourage you all to use that to your advantage, because it is not a curse. Then the second thing is around not putting yourself in positions that are traditionally admin roles. So Anna, can you give us the results of the 2 polls?
Yeah, so for the first poll, there was the conference room meeting that there's a table and do you sit at the table or in the back? Most people chose that they would sit at the table. So there's a 66% chance that people, they'd rather sit at the table and be part of the conversation. And then 33.3 said that they would rather sit in the back with the chairs than be part of that conversation. As for the second one about the work lunch, everybody very strongly agreed that they would walk the executives to the lunch break room and would just show them where it is and talk with them the entire time instead of putting themselves in a position where they're bringing them the food.
Awesome. So let's talk about that. So I'm really glad to hear about the second one. That one's a little bit easier, I think. But you know, believe it or not, that still happens. And the examples I always like to give, I don't drink coffee, so I couldn't make coffee for anybody, even if I wanted to. But when we're fully remote at my company, but when we were in the office, I would always greet people. If I had to greet people at the door, if we were having a meeting with potential investors, I would always walk them to the break room and say, hey, there's sodas and sparkling water in the refrigerator, and here's the coffee. Help yourself. I've done that throughout my entire career because I never want to put myself in positions that are traditionally admin roles. And there's nothing wrong with being an admin, but that's not what I am. I'm the CFO of the company. And I think we as women generally, we want to be nice. And yes, it is nice to grab someone coffee, but it's not your job. You don't have to do that. And so it's perfectly still just as nice to say, here's the break room, have at it. That's okay. That is still very nice. But let's go back to the 66 and 33%. So actually, that's better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be more 50-50 if you ask me. But I'm giving you my wisdom here. Always sit at the table. Next time, if I were to ever do this, I want to see that at 100%. And the reason for that is that it exudes confidence sitting at the table. You get to be part of the conversation. And you're putting yourself in a position of power and assertiveness by sitting. And always, please take my advice here. Always take a seat at the table. Do not sit on the outside looking in. You've earned it. Be confident about it and sit at the table. So the third thing I'm going to talk about here, and I talk about this with my daughters all the time, and I still do it, so I am not perfect here. Stop apologizing for something that is not your fault. You don't need to apologize for stating your opinion. You don't need to apologize for standing up for somebody, and you don't need to apologize for disagreeing with somebody. And so, I always do laugh with my daughters. Oh, we'll be in a grocery store and someone runs in and they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, why are you saying sorry? You didn't run into that person. They ran into you. That's a silly example. But I think we have a tendency to, again, if I go back to kind of prefacing our statements or with I think, I feel, this is another situation. Don't apologize unless you're wrong, which we already talked about. Then you own it, you move, and then you move on. But I think this is something that women tend to do, and I think it's something that we need to stop doing. And then the other thing is about being confident and sharing your opinion, and don't be afraid to ask questions. And so this is very personal to me. I was a CFO by the time I was 35 years old. That was a personal goal of mine. But I was always surrounded by men at the executive table. It wasn't until my last couple of jobs where we've had more females at the executive table, which is fabulous. But not only was I younger, but I was also a female, and so I find myself earlier in my career sitting at the table. So I did the right thing by sitting at the table. But when things outside of finance were brought up, where I knew I had an opinion and I knew it was a good opinion, I wasn't confident enough to share it. And so what would literally happen is in my mind, I was saying it. I was saying it to myself, and like the VP of marketing, a man sitting next to me, would say exactly what I had in my head because he was confident to say it. I was not confident enough, and so I had to learn that. And I learned it by getting mad at myself after the fifth or sixth time, where I'm telling the answer in my head instead of actually speaking it in front of the group. And so when I was going through this presentation with my 16-year-old, she said, do you know what I do, Mom? And I said, no, tell me. And she said, I sit in class and I whisper the answers under my breath instead of saying them out loud. for the fear of like being the center of attention, or maybe even the fear of being wrong. And so I see that even in her. It's a little bit different from a work to a school environment. But I said, Cadence, that's her name, I said, stop doing that. Like, be confident, even if you're wrong. What's the worst thing that could happen? Oh, you're wrong and you move on. That's okay. It's okay to be wrong. But it's funny how, even now, sometimes I do struggle with that. But kind of getting past that, and I have a couple of tips and tricks in the next slide as well, or the next couple of things that maybe can help with that as well. So if we go to the fifth one here, so this one is actually near and dear to my heart, and I'm gonna make a generalization here, but I went through this with a friend of mine that I've known since high school. She had children young. She decided not to go to college, and so after she got a divorce, she's like, oh gosh, I have to go out and get a job. What am I gonna do? And so I was helping her, and we were looking at job descriptions, and she's like, I only need like 3 out of the 8 requirements. And I'm like, so? She goes, well, I can't apply for that. If you were a man and let's say there's 10 requirements and you met 5 of them, he would be like, yes, I need 5 of them. I'm going to apply for this role. And my friend was like, well, I only need 5 of the 10. I can't do that. Of course you can. Apply for the job. Again, what is the worst that could happen? They could say no, they don't call you, but at least you did it. And I can tell you, as a hiring manager for many years, I would rather have someone who meets 5 out of the 10, 8 out of the 10 boxes every day of the week and twice on Sunday than someone that might check 10 out of 10, but isn't someone I would like to work with, or isn't the right cultural fit for the company. I'd rather take that chance on that 8 out of 10 person than the 10 out of 10 person. So apply for the job. Don't limit yourself because you may not feel like you hit all of the boxes. If you hit a lot of them, apply for the job. And then the last one, and this is one of the things that I think might be the most important takeaways as well, is just as somebody who, I have an accounting degree. I started out at Arthur Andersen in public accounting. And one of the things that really has helped me in my career is that I've gone above accounting and finance. And so I've learned all aspects of my company's business. So I have business acumen. I am a business CFO. I am not behind the scenes. I'm not the accountant. I'm not the corporate controller. I'm out there. I speak on behalf of our company. I do podcasts about our company. I have taken the time throughout my career to learn all aspects of the company's business. And you're like, well, what does that mean? So learn the elevator pitch, which I realized when I was giving this to my 16-year-old, she's like, Mom, I don't know what that is. So I use elevator pitch. So think about this. If you don't know what it is, let's say you get in an elevator with someone and you're going up to the 100th floor. And what that means is that you have 2 minutes or less to tell someone what your company does and make them interested in it. So what is your company's elevator pitch? Learn it. Be able to recite it without any problems. Another, example here. So as I mentioned, I'm in cybersecurity. So we are very technical sales engineers. So whenever I start at a new company, I sit down with a system engineer or a sales engineer, and I have them walk me through a product demo. Pretend I'm a customer. How would you sell our product? How would you talk about the benefits of our product and what it's going to do to help Mr. Customer or Mrs. Customer to do their job better or easier, whatever it is. Another example is sit down with the head of engineering and talk about what the process is for developing new product features. Sit down with the head of marketing and talk about how leads come in and how they're handled and tracked and measured. So learn about things that are outside of your standard, accounting and finance. And that is just, to me, is just so important because you don't have to pigeonhole yourself just into accounting or finance. Learning the other aspects of your company will make you an advocate for the company, and you'll also be seen as someone that others can reach out to when they need help. Again, going back to what we talked about the benefits of being assertive, the first one that I talked about was being viewed as a leader within your company. Doing this will be the number one thing that will help you get there, is learning all aspects of your company's business.
And speaking of that, we do have a question in the chat.
Yes.
Somebody asked, when did you make the goal of becoming a CFO at age 35?
at about 5. No, I'm kidding. But probably in high school, I would say. So I've actually known I wanted to be in accounting since about the 9th grade. So I was really a big fan of math, and one of my math teachers was talking about accounting and what a great field it was for women. And so as I started working at Arthur Andersen, I was there for 4 years, and I left to go work for one of the first companies that I had worked for there. And I had a really amazing mentor who wasn't a CFO, believe it or not. He was actually the head of legal. And he took me under his wing and he said, he goes, forget everything you learned in auditing. Sorry, auditors, but that's what he told me. He said, take off your auditor hat and I'm going to teach you how to be a business CFO. And it was the best thing to ever happen to me. And at that moment is when I had the goal. So I was probably 23 years old and decided that's what I wanted to do. And I had 12 years to get there. So, and I did it. I just put my head down. I worked really hard. I did a lot of these things that I mentioned in my presentation here, and it happened.
So with your whole journey to becoming a CFO, what do you think was the biggest challenges that you had to overcome with the things that you were trying to present to people and maybe having some miscommunication somewhere along the lines, or just having some roadblocks that seemed impossible to get past?
Yeah, I honestly think one of the biggest roadblocks was being young, being and being a woman. And I know that's probably a little bit of a cop-out answer, but those were two of the biggest roadblocks. And I can tell you one thing. I mean, I can't change the fact that I'm a woman. That's who I am. But the overcoming that, not overcoming being a woman, that sounds bad, but gaining that confidence, that is what helped me through the roadblocks. It really did. And by sitting down and learning a business and being, so when someone from engineering, I mean, I've had people say, well, what do you know about engineering? You've never been an engineer. Well, you're right. I've never been an engineer, but I sat down with the head of engineering and we talked about this. And it looks like in this process, you didn't follow these 3 steps. And so right there, they were like, well, wait a second here. So maybe she does know a little bit about engineering, for instance. That wouldn't be something that I typically would know. And that's how you work in those, getting past some of those things. And sometimes, guys, fake it till you make it, right? I mean, I hate to say that, but that is part of this as well. And it comes down to practice, right? And you can sit here, things that make you uncomfortable. Like, actually, public speaking makes me uncomfortable. I don't know if it came across that way today, but it does make me uncomfortable. So what did I do? I sat down with my 19-year-old, my 16-year-old, my husband, a couple people at work, and I practiced. Those are the things that will help you get past whatever that block is for you. And again, the biggest thing that I can get across is just confidence. With confidence comes assertiveness. With assertiveness comes confidence. Those two things go hand in hand. If you can master that, you will be very successful.
Looking back on your past experiences, do you think there was anything at all that you might have done differently or changed? Or do you think you would just do it all the same way, just with more pride and just knowing that you will get there eventually?
That is a really great question. I mean, I'm sure there are things that I would, that I would like to do different. I mean, the things that actually I'd like that I can say is I wish that earlier I would have maybe taken a few more chances. There's some jobs I didn't take that, the companies ended up being very successful, although every company I've worked for has been acquired, so I can't complain about the success of that, but maybe being a little bit scared and not having the confidence to take it to that next level, or because I was younger in my career for being a CFO and really surrounded by a lot of men, I had a tendency to let that be a hindrance to me. And I would like to see young women as they're coming up not to have to deal with that. and being confident from the outset, and not, not feeling intimidated, potentially being the only woman in the room, which I think now what's really great to see is that's not the case. I mean, I have another female executive that's on the executive team at the company I am now. My last company, there were 3. So, I'm definitely seeing a lot of the changes. But the great news is that even when you make a mistake, you pivot and you do something different. And that's okay. And that's okay too. But I to get to the root of the issue, I think I would have done most things the same. I wish I would have had more confidence when I was younger. And I think that would have really helped me a little bit more in my career if I would have been a little bit more confident. And I had someone to talk to me about these things. We didn't have these forums when I was graduating from college. So I'm really glad to see these as well and participate in them as well. And then one of the other things I would say that I've historically not been that great at is networking. So I actually think when I look at my daughters that they are so good at networking. And I don't know if that's because social media or what it is. That is something that I have struggled with my entire career because there's so many other things I like to do other than work. And so networking, I would always view as work. And I think that was a mistake on my end. Now I'm trying to make up for it now by doing podcasts and other things and really utilizing LinkedIn, which is another thing I would suggest. But that would be something that I would really recommend that I think was a mistake early in my career, is not really networking as much as I should and attending events.
So we do have a message from one of the participants. It is, I'm studying group dynamics in grad school this quarter. Being assertive is one of the power styles that you can use in a group. You can also use passive aggressive and aggressive power styles. I would say assertive is the way to go when working within groups. Do you think there is ever a time to not use assertive power style?
So I agree that assertiveness is the way to go whenever you can. I will tell you in certain circumstances I've had to be aggressive. And those are circumstances where I feel someone has crossed the line too many times where assertiveness is not working. And so while I think it's a last resort to go the aggressiveness route, I think once you become more assertive and you start practicing it in everyday life, you will know when you need to take it a little bit further. And when you get to that point, as I have in my career, I could count on one hand, probably 2 fingers, how many times I've had to be aggressive with somebody. And it's been very situational, but it was required. Does that answer your question, hopefully?
Right. So speaking of those times that you did have to be more aggressive, do you think that changed people's views of who you are as a person or what you stand for? Since women do often come off as rude when they try to be assertive or when they have to be more aggressive because somebody just doesn't understand what they're doing wrong.
I think in the situations that I was aggressive, like I said, I can probably count them on 2 fingers. It was the right thing to do. And the 2 situations I'm thinking of, I wasn't taken advantage of again. So in those situations, because the outcome was what I wanted, I would say that it was justified. And actually, I think it helped me because the behaviors I didn't like stopped. And that was the ultimate outcome. And so I do think that I actually think those people may have respected me more because I was more aggressive than assertive. But again, if I go back to answer the question around, and I bring it back to the presentation around the fear of why women fear being assertive, not everyone is going to like you. And that's okay. You have to get comfortable that just like in personal life, your professional life really is not that much different. There are people you are going to gravitate to and really like, and there's going to be people that you don't like. And it's going to be the flip side for you. And you have to get comfortable with the fact that not everyone is going to like you. And so if someone is offended by you being assertive, then that's okay. You have to again, you can't control the way others react. Now, if you're being aggressive and rude and condescending, that's different. But if you're practicing these things we talked about today and being respectful in your assertiveness, you have nothing to apologize for. You have nothing to be sorry for. And if they react in a certain way, that is on them. And really, that's more of a reflection on them and probably their insecurities more than anything else. So again, as long as you are respectful, calm, positive, those things that we talked about while you're being assertive, you're doing nothing wrong. And you shouldn't worry as much about what people think about you. And more people than not will actually respect you and view you as a leader than maybe one or two people that are put off by your assertiveness. And I would take that, again, I would be more than happy with 8 people liking me versus 2 people that didn't.
And that kind of leads into the next question that we have is, how do you deal with a bully who can't take inputs from others at work?
So were you a fly on the wall for like the last couple weeks of of my company? So, at my company, we do 360 feedback as part of our performance review process. And so it's completely confidential. And that's one area where I've actually had to deal with this quite a bit, because people are like, well, I want to know who said that about me. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you. That's why it's 360 feedback. Or another situation is, I mentioned we do these culture discussions. So my HR manager and I have sat down with every person in the company and we ask people for their feedback. We want to know what's working. We want to know what's not working. And so we prepared this presentation for the executive team. And I was shocked about how many of the executives are like, oh, I don't believe this, or, oh, this can't be true. And it's like, again, I go back to perception is reality. I've used that term many times in the last several weeks. And so I felt like I was like literally being bullied into not sharing this information with this is the perfect example where people didn't want us to then go back in our next all hands, which we promised to do, and talk about it to summarize all of the feedback. I mean, my HR person and I had 19 hours worth of meetings, 19 one-hour meetings to get this feedback. And I'm not going to allow you to tell me we can't disclose this to the company. And if you tell me we're going to do that, I'm not going to do this process again, because it's my credibility that's on the line. The employees trust me to be the steward of their feedback, and you're trying to bully me into not giving it because you don't like what they had to say. I'm not doing that. That's a real life example that just happened 2 weeks ago. And guess what? Next Wednesday, we're giving my presentation in the all hands meeting in front of the entire company, because I stood up for myself and I was confident about it because I have conviction that it's the right thing to do. And at the end of the day, I was able to convince everybody that this is what we're going to do and we're doing it.
Then we do have another question. You mentioned podcasts. Have you done one? Have that information to share? Was it on the topic of assertiveness?
So I've done 2 podcasts so far in the last few months, and they were not on assertiveness. But I will tell you, on our exec call today, I had it before this meeting. I got a few chuckles that I was picked to do this topic, so they seem to agree that it was a good topic for me to have. But no, the 2 podcasts I have done, and if you want to link with me on LinkedIn, you can actually listen to them there. One of them was on navigating as a startup CFO during COVID. And then another one was actually just sort of general, CFO talk. It was a bunch of different questions. This one was 55 minutes. So if you have 55 minutes to burn, I highly encourage you to take a listen to it. Just around thoughts around change management and AI and just some of the things that we're dealing with from a CFO perspective in relation to COVID and some of the things that are going on in the world today, and really also centered around cybersecurity, which is my expertise from a CFO perspective.
Okay, and I think this is going to be the last question, but what do you think the biggest change was for you going from just being in accounting to now being part of something that was so much bigger, because you are the CFO now and you deal with so many different branches like cybersecurity, you mentioned engineering before. So what would you say was the biggest shocker from that?
I would say that at the biggest shocker firm is just how important it is that all of these groups interact and how actually intertwined they are. So now, I mean, when I was starting up in my career, I focused on, accounting stuff. So revenue recognition and, equity and all of that kind of stuff. But when I was put to the side of this mentor of mine in legal and said, hey, I'm going to teach you how to do this. I got out of my comfort zone. That's the biggest thing. Get out of your comfort zone. So I started working with the salespeople. I started working with customers, understanding what customer needs are, what questions they're asking, why they're asking it. And so just really taking the different pieces from the different areas. Again, people looked at me then as a leader, of someone that they can come to, that I wasn't just sort of back office accounting. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want, there are many opportunities to do that. But I saw an opportunity to be something bigger and better. And so when people would say, hey, do you want to do this? If I could do it, I would do it. Oh, do you want to take on revenue recognition? Do you want to take on HR? Do you want to take on talent acquisition? Do you want to take on IT? Yes, I do. I want to take those things on because that's what's going to get me to be that CFO by the time I was 35. And I took on as much as I could while still setting boundaries as best as I could. But I did try to take on as much as possible, because that's the more understanding you can have on how a company works, all of the different areas, the more successful you'll be from a CFO perspective, because you'll be operational, you'll be strategic. Those are the words that you want people to use when they describe you. And by doing that, you will get there a lot faster.
Okay, well, that is all the time that we have for you guys today. Thank you, Danielle, for being here. Here is the QR code once again for people who are here for Edge. Next up, we have 2 more sessions. One is going to be on the balancing work and life, and the other one is on professional versus personal identities. So once again, thank you, Danielle, for being here and presenting this presentation with us. Thank you, everyone, for being here, listening to Danielle, and being part of our session.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Perfect.